All right. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the REVV Show. It's a brand new show hosted by yours truly, where we're going to be deep diving and exploring the incredible ecosystem that is REVV Motorsport. Now, whether that's interviews or game nights or just something fun for you guys, the community, you guys are going to have to stay tuned to all the upcoming episodes. Now, if you're new to Rev, I'm Matt Solomon, your host of the show and your friendly neighborhood brand ambassador. In my previous life, I was a professional racing driver, racing all sorts of things from Formula 3 to GT3 and endurance racing. But now I'm just a massive DGen, among other things. So, enough about me. Our first ever guest on this show is Mr. Will Griffiths. He is Mr. Bossman, head honcho, top dog, big cheese of REVV Motorsport, otherwise known as the VP of Commercial Strategy at Animoca Brands. But I like the titles I gave him better. Now, I'm sure those of you who are listening will have some questions for Will. So make sure to type them in the chat, and we'll go through a few of the questions at the end. So if you're listening live, now's the time to say hello in the chat to and give a warm welcome to Mr. Bossman. Good morning, Will. How are you doing?
Hi, Matt. Great to be here finally and connect with
Yeah,
the
finally.
community. Thanks for the introduction. I'm fresh out of your green room. I've been sitting in there on mute and realized I haven't done my hair and makeup, so apologies in advance for that.
That's right. We can
Um,
we can edit all of that in post. It's all good.
Excellent. Good to hear. Good to hear. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. How's your Friday?
Yeah, it's nice. I'm here in my man cave in Oxford, the kind of HQ for me. I go into London every now and then, but this is where I'm based. I've got my beer fridge back here, projector behind me. Life couldn't really be much
What
better.
else do you need? Yeah, exactly. Well, we've got Chelsea Gogo saying, "Hey, hey, Will."
Hey, Chelsea.
Is the fact that he enjoys or is a fan of Chelsea, is that a problem?
For me,
For
no, not
you?
at all. No, no, I like football, but I try to enjoy it as a sport
For the
rather than have allegiances.
Fair
Actually,
enough.
Hereford United was my team, but like back in the day, they don't really feature in the Premier League. But you can look them up and see how they're doing.
All right, all right. Maybe I will. Um, okay, cool. So you've been behind the scenes for a little while now. You arrived at Animoca in September. Is that correct?
That's right, end of September.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, we before we dive into kind of what's been brewing, why don't you introduce yourself to the community? Many of whom you're probably meeting you for the first time.
Hi, everyone. So, yeah, I've been here for about 6 months in sort of sleeper mode. I've been doing all sorts of different things, chatting to the different studios, meeting everyone in Hong Kong. I've been over there a couple of times. As I said, I'm based in the UK, father of two little girls, married to an Aussie, Tess. We moved around a bit. We've lived in Perth, Australia, and obviously in Oxford, and worked in a total kind of random assortment of different places over the years. So I started out in military R&D, which is pretty nuts. So like putting cameras in Game Boys and stuff back in the 1990s. And then since then, I've been into security consulting with Accenture and BT. So kind of like getting into this place, this sort of hacking mentality. So like breaking servers and trying to break into banks and stuff on behalf of a consultancy, which is kind of fun. It sounded a little bit better than it was because the reality was just sitting in dark data centers and setting up laptops and all that kind of stuff. And then I left that and went into my own business. So I set up a small games company just at the start of the App Store, which was really fun. Made a bunch of different games. None of them actually made it into the ecosystem because they were all quite risky plays. And I think I helped Apple develop their guidelines about breaking phones and things like that. At the end of that, I got really, kind of wistful about the games industry and wondering like how I could move forward. So I started working for this company, Natural Motion, who are also based in Oxford. That was really fun. So I worked on all these different games, so like American football games, ice hockey games. I also worked on this game about a little horse called My Horse for little girls, which was really about having a pet and owning it. And then the final game I worked on there was called Clumsy Ninja, which actually ended up featuring in the Apple iPhone 5 keynote speech, which was really quite an interesting experience. So dealing with that and to an introduction really to games and marketing and all that side of things and free to play. After that, I pivoted away into I didn't really have much of a choice because my wife made me move to Australia at that point. So we moved over to Perth, and I started working in really the only kind of online games jobs that you could get over there, which were in casinos. So this was slightly against my better judgment. I didn't really think of myself as a casino person, but I took up the challenge, and I worked at a studio there called The Broth that was split between Perth and Las Vegas. So lots of travel between those two places, which if you don't know, takes quite a long time. It's about a 30-hour trip each way. So I did that for a couple of years, cut my teeth sort of in Perth. And then I moved to another company called Virtual Gaming Worlds, which is quite small when I joined. I was the head of product, and we kind of scaled the company up from about 6 of us to about 200 and went through a sort of 100x scale up, which was fascinating. So I'd been through this journey before of like having a small kind of revenue stream and feeding it and optimizing and doing lots of user experience testing and A/B testing, all that kind of stuff. That was really fun. That was for about 2.5 years. And I left there after getting married and having 2 kids, and joined this company called Bamboo Blockchain. So this was my first sort of experience at Web3. They're a small Aussie crew who'd raised a bunch of funds using an ICO, and their idea was to do roundups from transactions into a crypto portfolio. So I helped them launch their product in 2018. I don't know if those of you who are into Web3 already at that point will know that 2018 was a sort of bit of a funny time because everything tanked. So this huge amount of money that they'd raised dwindled right down to sort of bootstrap territory. It was kind of like shoestring territory. So we ended up shipping the beta for that product actually from Bali. So we were working in Bali for a couple of months. So that was quite fun. And then I kind of realized that looking after 2 kids when you don't have any support like we did was getting a little bit too much at the same time as the job opportunities in Perth were a little bit thin on the ground. So I started looking around for my next challenge, and I found an opportunity at Codemasters in the UK. So we moved back to the UK, again to Oxford, and I started working there. It's based in Leamington Spa, which is about an hour and a half outside of Oxford towards Birmingham. And that's a really fascinating company. It's been around for 35 years now. They've made all sorts of games. I'm sure you would have all had some sort of Codemasters experience. So back in the day, they were making games on tapes like Dizzy, things like that. Then they made Micro Machines, and then more recently, Colin McRae Rally, which you may have heard of. And then even more recently, when I joined, they were making Dirt Rally 2. They've been making the Formula One console game for about 10 years now. So that was sort of super interesting. And my job there was to help them move from a premium model to a games as a service model. So like making money after the point of sale. So that's a huge change for a company like that. So there's all sorts of implications for asset pipelines, the way the games are designed, the way they think about revenue and all that kind of thing. So that was a really fun and kind of enriching experience. And we rolled out analytics across the portfolio. We revamped the companion app product, which is still going now. It's called RaceNet, which basically is a kind of an app that you use that you can get telemetry from all the different games that you play. And you can see sort of where you were driving and sort of scrub through your performance and look for optimizations. You can use it right now actually on Formula One. There you go, Codemasters plug. And also customer service. And we spend a lot of time talking about subscription models, free-to-play models. How could we adopt these? We kind of perceive that obviously free-to-play is the way forward, but the industry is probably, I guess, hasn't really solved the free-to-play model for racing games. It obviously has on mobile, but console not so much. Arguably, Forza Horizon has, but that's part of a subscription. So that was a really fun experience. And after about 18 months, towards the back end of 2020, the Take-Two Games decided that they wanted to buy Codemasters, so they made a bid, and then EA made a bid off the back of that. So I was right in the middle of this sort of acquisition process. EA ended up buying Codemasters, and so we all moved into EA. And then I spent about 9 months figuring out where all these teams that I'd built fit in this giant studio. So to give you some idea, there was about 800 people at Codemasters, and there's something like 20,000 people at EA. So that was a really interesting kind of exploration of, taking a team that's rooted in what they do, that they've been doing for a very long time, and they're making sense of that in the context of a much wider portfolio, you know, sitting alongside things like FIFA and stuff like that. So when I'd finished sort of integrating my team, I joined the strategic growth team at EA. So I then spent about a year working there on things like the metaverse and NFTs and what the future of that might look like for EA, which was pretty fun in terms of subject matter. I really enjoyed it, and the crypto and gambling experience and all of the experience in free to play kind of came to bear in those conversations, which was great. And I made quite a large network of people. The only problem with that job was that I'm here in Oxford, and pretty much exclusively everybody who I was working with was on the west coast of America. So what that meant is I would wake up in the morning and all of my colleagues would be fast asleep until sort of 2 o'clock in the afternoon, at which point everyone turned on, and that's when my day began. And having done that for about a year, I decided it wasn't really how I wanted to operate, and we didn't want to move to California. So I started looking around, and I ended up speaking to Robbie Young, who's our CEO of Animoca in Europe. And
shout out Robbie if he's listening right now.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Robbie. Thanks for the opportunity. So basically, had a chat with him, met all of the XCOM, as we call it, so this sort of leadership team at Animoca, and sort of felt around a bit in this sort of this space, this racing and motorsport space that obviously they're very heavily into. And what they wanted me to do was to come in and bring all of that together and sort of make sense of it in the context of Web3. And I thought that sounded pretty interesting. So I accepted the offer, I think, in July, and then found myself starting in September at this really interesting intersection of Web3 racing, racing games and motorsport, and started meeting people. And I've basically been going around and talking to the team since then. So that's I guess brought you up to speed on my life. Now I've said it once, we can record it. I won't ever have to tell everyone again. But it's been fun.
Yeah, and I remember having that burger with you in London.
Oh yeah,
and yeah, that was awesome. So yeah, I have clearly met you before. Yeah, I mean, what an incredible journey you've been on. I mean, living and working in Bali must have not have been I could think of worse places to have been for a little bit.
we used to go around. So there were about 6 of us, and we used to go around on mopeds, and there was a kind of lead moped that had a Wi-Fi spot in, and everyone was like
No
tethered to
way.
that. So you didn't want to like lose touch with people, because then you couldn't actually. It was like
Yeah.
this sort of weird DAO that was like traveling around, Bali at any one time. Yeah, it was really fun actually. It's a good bunch of guys.
Amazing. There's a public service announcement. If you guys are riding bikes in Bali or anywhere around Southeast Asia, please wear a helmet. Cheap head, cheap helmet. That's what I always got told. So wear a helmet.
Good advice.
Yeah, but I mean, hey, that's all, all now kind of brought you to Rev, and we're really excited to have you on board. Like I'm sure the community will have definitely picked up on the fact that you've been at Codemasters in EA, and like you said, they're one of the powerhouses of motorsport games. Not the motorsport games, but games that involve motorsport. Having developed Colin McRae, like you said, Dirt, F1, Toka Race Driver, which is I remember that was one of the first racing games I came across when I was a wee lad. But look, there's I think one more question I think there's around this is which will really kind of flow nicely into the whole Animoca and Rev discussion. There's clearly so much synergy between what you've done at Codemasters and EA and kind of what you've been brought in to do here at Rev. So what is the kind of the biggest piece of knowledge that or kind of experience that you picked up in Cody's and EA, and how are you bringing that to Rev and Web3? And obviously you have some experience in Web3, but just kind of summarize that for me, if you will, please.
So much. It's a good question. So first of all, Codemasters was awesome. Like, it's a real family over there. There's a whole, these guys have been doing this stuff for a long time, and there are people. I think one of the guys who I used to work with had worked there for over 30 years. Like one of the people. So think about the level of commitment and just the culture of a place that someone would want to stay there for that long. So it gives you some idea. And I was fortunate enough in my role to be working across loads of different studios. So you get to see, like, each studio had its own culture. You know, we had one in Liverpool, one in Birmingham making Formula One. We got one in Southam, which is a place in Leamington Spa, and then there were a lot of remote people as well. But the first thing I would say is the level of creativity that's on show, and you know, you might think making a racing game is, you know, relatively straightforward. You know, just make a car and put a driver in it and figure out the controls, kind of thing. But actually, there's so much more to it. It really is. And like the insight into you know, things like handling and you know, the types of things that the community there. We had a very active community certainly around Dirt Rally franchise and the Formula One franchise. There were all sorts of things to consider. It was my first experience of AAA development. So I'd obviously worked in free to play and worked on some pretty like high fidelity free to play titles, but this was different. And so everything there was very much optimized towards, you know, launching a very successful polished product. And then I was sort of joking when I got there. I asked them where their data was and how they knew how things, you know, how the games were performing. And they did have some data, but like, I think, you know, my summary of it was that, you know, that the first bit of data historically that they had, that they were used to looking at, was the review scores after a game came out. So there was a lot of room for improvement in that area. But the other thing that I really took away from there was that, you know, again, being across all these different studios is like thinking about games as a portfolio as opposed to a single game. So thinking about, you know, your audience as a whole for racing games, and then segmenting that into people who have particular tastes, you know, people who are looking for a very hardcore experience or something much more casual, like you would get in Grid, or to some extent Dirt, which is a separate franchise to Dirt Rally. So that was really fun, and we did a lot of market research into that, and a lot of you know, spotting gaps where we didn't have a presence, and thinking that through, talking about, you know, potentially becoming a subscription at one time, thinking about the implications of moving to free to play. And then the other stuff that I picked up there would have been things around the motorsports calendar. So I've sort of vaguely been in touch with Formula One as a sport over the years, but, you know, really understanding the implications of that calendar for creating content and video games, and working very closely with the marketing team. So understanding that, you know, you can't, the Formula One teams, for example, are negotiating deals with sponsors right up until the beginning of the season. So they don't necessarily release their liveries until such time as they're ready. And that time doesn't always necessarily match up with the time that the studios need that information in order to build the cars. So there's all these sort of dependencies that are created between these different organizations. And also, it's my first real experience firsthand of like car licensing deals and how they work, and the different requirements that different brands have. You know, if you have a particular luxury car brand, won't allow itself to be positioned next to another one in a certain way, because they want to, you know, have parity, so they don't look like they're slower or anything like that. I think overall, probably the biggest, I mean, so the portfolio stuff is really important, but like the most interesting bit for me was this concept that these games are made with very specific audiences in mind. And of course, the temptation is, certainly from a free to play angle, to widen the funnel as much as possible. So you might look at very specific title and be looking to solve a challenge where you get more users into it, or you know, sell more copies. The temptation is to make it very easy, or to like, so that new people can come and play, or to have forgiving controls or change the handling system. But that isn't really something that works. So the most important thing is to keep that core group of players who know what they want and are fans of the franchises engaged throughout whatever you do, and take them on the journey with you. And I see a lot of similarities between that and the Web3 audience.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think. Sorry, go on. We'll finish.
I was just going to say that I just think that I mean, that was Comas. I think that it's a great place. Even now that it's been bought by EA, I think they're much better off. So like, because obviously I popped out of there and went into EA, and then EA was the same sort of stuff but a much bigger scale. So no longer just looking at racing games, but also looking at all of EA Sports, and then the Sims, and Plants v Zombies and all the rest of them, and thinking about like how kind of all of these things become greater than their parts. So there's a lot of really smart people there, thinking about not just right now, here and now, how do we get more users or make a great game? Like, what kind of games are the games of the future, and the way that different younger generations are engaging with content. And yeah, so I feel pretty fortunate to have had an opportunity to hang out with all those people, and I'm still in contact with a lot of them actually, and speak to them fairly regularly. So yeah, it was good.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, like the parallels that you drew there between the games portfolios that they had, or looking at games as a portfolio, and how we kind of view it at Rev, and also that relationship between sort of how, I don't want to make the direct comparison, but with EA and Animoca, and how they have a host of different experiences and areas that you can
Mm.
tap into, and then how we fit in as a motorsport ecosystem as well. I kind of love those parallels. So you joined the company back in September, and we had a number of things on the go at the time, and we obviously still do, and a hell of a lot more, in fact. But what were your first observations when you first arrived at Animoca?
Well, it's very, very different to anywhere I've worked before, and certainly to coming from Codemasters and EA, who were like effectively blue chip organizations. Animoca's trying to do something new and different. And that's at the core of everything that we do and what they're thinking about. And I'm someone who likes working with lots of different disciplines. I find it really interesting to have a conversation with a designer and then go talk to someone about finance, or speak to a legal team about some nuance that we're trying to work around. But here there's you have all the same actors, but then there's like another layer, right? So it's not just games, it's these experiences, this sort of live service that we're trying to create, this open metaverse. And for that, there's to achieve that is non-trivial. And there are loads of people who have like just amazing insights and roles that I would never have interacted with before. So there's all the usual people involved in games design, animators, artists, developers, back end, front end, but then you've also got all of the Web3 technology as well. So you've got these people who, I won't name names because otherwise they'll get bombarded on LinkedIn, but just like incredibly smart people who are working in on the whole blockchain, and like analyzing different chains, different opportunities, market trends, and then you have this whole like digital assets layer of people monitoring the markets and understanding that. And then there's this team called the tokenomics team who are looking at the which is like an extension of games design, I guess, where you're looking at the balancing of not just the in-game economy, but like the implications for that from the point of view of Web3 players and Web3 investors. So there's this whole like playground of fun going on, and everyone without exception has been really, really nice and fun to work with. And it's, I guess, one thing I was a little worried about was being in the UK and the head office being in Hong Kong. I thought it might make things a bit tricky, but actually it's really nice because it's a truly sort of multicultural environment, and everyone is very much sort of remote / online first. And it was great to get the opportunity to go and visit the studio in Hong Kong. But obviously there are other teams that I'm now working with who are sort of dotted around the world through various different acquisitions. So it feels like a sort of global workplace in a way that I haven't experienced before. Of course, I've worked remotely with teams and people from different places, but to have whole entities operating and delivering and doing all their own things in these different places was pretty cool. That was my sort of first impression when I did the rounds and met all of the different people involved.
Yeah,
But then of course the games, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Then you add a whole another layer of to the beast that is Animoca, and been there for 3 years now. It's still amazing that I'm finding so many different people that I'm constantly just new people that I'm meeting. Um,
Yeah.
but let's look at Rev. And when you first arrived, Rev specifically, and again, maybe expanding this out to Animoca, but IP has been a big thing that has been a big part of Animoca's ethos. And with Rev having a very strong relationship with the likes of MotoGP and Formula E, and now we've obviously got our own title, Rev Racing. What were your discoveries there when you first arrived?
So great team. I'd say straight away, the people working on this stuff like are all very good. They're all doing like a kind of massive variety of different things. I definitely felt like they were quite thinly spread. Um, I think that was my one of my sort of first impressions. I couldn't believe how many different projects and things people were working on. And then I went and had a look at the community to sort of understand what was going on there, and I could see that um, probably as a result of that, there was a certain amount of kind of opaqueness. There wasn't as this whole like Web3 thing about building in public. I mean, obviously, some people are really extolling that, like Yuga and etc. But that's what we wanted to do, but it didn't seem like that was like coming across. So the community was definitely a little bit, what sort of left wondering what was going on. And there are a couple of other things as well. So some of the games were a little delayed, maybe a lot delayed, and so expectation management is something that is really important. And then some of these games were designed to give rewards out, and people were getting given rewards, and then there was a bit of a delay between when the rewards were earned or handed out as a result of winning a race or whatever, and then when they were actually getting paid was quite unpredictable. So that's certainly something that needs to be fixed, and it's something that I know is important from previous roles. Like you're kind of by delaying that, you're kind of interrupting this core loop of enjoying the spoils of your successes. So if in a normal free-to-play game you would earn some gems, then you could just go spend them immediately, whereas here it seemed that was sort of being interrupted somewhat. So we're taking a big look at that. The games themselves, like Rev Racing, is quite an interesting title. So obviously it's running in the browser. You can look at it. It's not a AAA racing game. It's not Dirt Rally 2 or a Formula One, but it had seen a huge amount of activity, and that we have something like 50 or 60,000 individuals holding assets for that game. So I see that as a huge opportunity for us to there's a lot that can be done there. And then MotoGP and Manager and Formula E, I discovered when I arrived that both of these games are running late. So I've kind of had a look at that. I think there's definitely some challenges around the execution, which I can talk about maybe a bit later if we talk about like the plans for each of the franchises. But essentially, these games are designed with Web3 players in mind. So manager games are a really good fit for the types of people who tend to be in Web3. So they're the kind of things that you can analyze and you can like pore over. You can build your own models outside the game. So I think that they're very appropriate for our ecosystem. So yeah, that was my kind of first impressions of looking at these different titles. So things are a bit delayed, community a bit disengaged, but a lot of potential. These things like MotoGP, several hundred million people watch MotoGP every time there's a race, and there's a reach much further beyond that on social media. So that's a huge opportunity. And Formula E is a really, really up and coming motorsport. There's a very young audience, and there's a lot of fans, and there's a lot of big names becoming involved. So some of the drivers themselves are quite famous already, and but there's some big name brands getting behind it. Porsche, McLaren, people like that. So yeah, it seemed like a good starting point.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I joined Rev I think only a month into the token being launched, and so really have been on this journey over the last 3 years, and it's been incredible to see and witness, and I think you're definitely right. I think it's a great starting point, and I guess we'll get into it now, but there's a lot more things coming, and I think now that the whole technologies are being developed every day that make certain things in kind of across the Web3 ecosystem much more accessible. So for some of our viewers here who have they may have played some of the games like MotoGP Ignition or Rev Racing, or they've just kind of been along this journey as well. They may or may not know that over the last 12 months, we've also acquired several top games development studios, including Grease Monkey Games, Eden Games, and We Play Media. Can you tell me what kind of impact these studios will have on Rev moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, these guys are, we talked about the games that we launched in browsers, and I think that's still a really important point to make, that these games are very accessible, and some of them are live already. Um, Grease Monkey games, Eden games, when we played. So Grease Monkeys are freaking awesome, right? They're in Melbourne. Um, they have made they made this subconscious decision of, maybe I'll get the timing wrong, maybe 5-10 years ago, to get into this space of drift games, and they completely embraced it. So they are, like, if you go to their office, like, you come in, like, the ground floor is like a garage full of these amazing cars that they've been working on, that they take to real life events, and so they are totally embedded in that scene. And along the way, they've made a couple of mobile games. They made Talk Burnout and Talk Drift, both of which do very well on the app stores. Um, and that was a sort of state that I think we acquired them in. And they had a vision to build a Web3 version, which is the Talk Drift 2 game, which is no longer mobile and uses the Unreal Engine. And it's important to say that I think, everything these guys do, they do with a certain sort of fresh style. They're really thinking things through. Their creative process is really, like, interesting and gets results. It seems like every day, I'm sure it's not every day, but it seems like there's something new that they've shared that's amazing, whether it's a trailer or like some art from inside one of the modes in the game. And I think that what they're doing is sort of leaning into this trend of which is not dissimilar from when we went from free to play mobile games that were like 2D on Facebook, like Farmville, to when we started seeing things like CSR racing on mobile, like this premium quality, like AAA quality Web3 game. So this won't run in a browser, but it will be something that you can play on your PC, certainly to begin with. And everything that I've seen that they're producing is brilliant. So they're kind of adding this new kind of, like, leveling up the quality that we can achieve in our assets. And that's something that we'll use, hopefully, not just within their games, but they can help us develop some really, really beautiful NFTs. Also, Melbourne is a great place, so lucky them. And then Eden Games is based in Lyon in France, and much like Codemasters, they've been making games for a very, very long time, and mainly racing games. So they've worked on loads of different franchises. I think arguably they made the first open world racing game. I think it was Test Drive 2 Unlimited, and that still has a huge community on Facebook. But they've also made Drive Club, and more recently Gear Club, which was in, I think, the Apple iPhone. No, not the iPhone. The Apple Vision Pro
Arcade.
presentation,
Oh,
which
yeah,
it's
that
in
too.
the
Yeah,
arcade, but actually
yeah,
featured on stage during the Vision Pro thing. So you can see that Apple certainly think the level of quality they're achieving is really something to shout about. So what they bring to the table is just this massive experience in racing games. And what I have found from spending time with them is that their design team is really amazing, and it's like they've got this tool set of things to make racing games, and then they found another sort of compartment with all the Web3 bits in that lean into, like, ownership and customization and provenance and stuff. And it's just really awesome to see the types of things that they're coming up with, like really, really cool ideas. And obviously they're working on some stuff which is not announced yet, but it's pretty cool, basically.
yeah. I mean, like, we saw the trailers there, and that's the trailer from GMG, Grease Monkey, of Torque Drift 2. I think I listened to maybe 10% of what you said during that trailer, because just get mesmerized by watching that video. It's just so cool. And I've actually got one of the bobbleheads right here, so shout out GMG.
I've got one.
And you got one?
Yeah, it's in the background somewhere.
Should be on your desk. Should be playing. Get it there. But
Gets
yeah,
in
I
the
mean,
way
we
of the mouse.
also yeah. But yeah, I mean, we also saw that that clip from Gear Club, Stradale, and it's I grew up playing a lot of these games, and especially with Eden. You'd say they pioneered the open world for driving games, and now you've got the likes of Crew. They recently released Motorfest, or are going to be releasing Motorfest. You've got Forza Horizon, and Very much the kind of the grandfather of all that was Eden Games, and all the work they did with Test Drive. But we've also got We Play Media. Can you
Mhm.
tell us a little bit more about what these guys do?
Yeah, so we play media based in Phoenix, Arizona. Their big thing, I mean, they're actually working on a load of different things for us at the moment since the acquisition, but the kind of main sort of acquisition reason was that they have this the official MotoGP game. You know what? I didn't even mention Eden Games make the Formula One mobile game. They're actually
Yeah.
running the current official Formula One mobile game in live service, which is no small feat. That's a pretty amazing game. Go check it out. It's free to play. The We Play Media also have We Play Media have the equivalent game, but essentially for MotoGP. And that has a huge amount of engagement. It's wildly popular. When I was at one of the MotoGP events recently, and I saw a bunch of people playing it, so it's obviously still very relevant. And I believe they've just updated for the latest season as well. So go check that out. But yeah, they bring a hugely like a really good relationship with MotoGP and the company behind MotoGP, Dorna. So that's enhanced a lot of our operations there, and we're really working very closely together with the MotoGP ecosystem. So you'll see there's a product called Guru, which we'll talk about a little bit in a minute, but that's been the title sponsor for the Jerez race this year in Spain, which we all went to, and that was like lots of fun, and got to meet a lot of celebrities, including Jorge Lorenzo, the 5 times world champion, which you can't say his name without saying the second bit apparently. And yeah, so that's cool. And then they also have a presence, kind of, but not as a title sponsor, but throughout the season at all the races. So there's lots going on in that space, and we've got some ideas around how obviously that links together with the ignition stuff, and how we kind of further the MotoGP ecosystem using but we've got some interesting ideas. I don't want to share them yet, but we will share fairly soon because we'll have to release it at some point. So that's what's going on with WePlay. And then I will kind of, if you think about like the Rev Racing and Formula E, MotoGP Ignition, and then you layer these guys on top, these acquisitions, you've got essentially, I like to think of it like a kind of Lego set for a motorsports and racing ecosystem. So we've got this big box of bits, and we need to like put it together. And that's what a lot of the work that has been going on behind the scenes over the last 6 months has been, making sense of that and thinking about what NFTs make sense where and why, and where the utility should be and the interoperability, and bringing some focus to that. So, and I think the fact that we've got AAA games in the pipeline that can use some of these assets just makes it all the more interesting. So it's reasonably kind of complicated to begin with, but like any good Lego set, hopefully at the end it'll look rather amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say, there's so much when you look at it as a whole, and especially now, given all these acquisitions. You're looking at it as a whole, there's so much to unpack when it comes to all the different games, the Rev token, PFPs, real life events.
Mhm.
Having all of these titles and experiences under one umbrella obviously has its own set of challenges. But kind of what I want to know is, moving forward, what is the vision of Rev through kind of 2023 and beyond?
So we talked about the Lego set kind of idea, but like you put the Lego set aside. Look, what you really have is a portfolio, like the beginning of a portfolio here. So we have these different games. So we've been looking at that's a big part of the puzzle, right? Like, does this game make sense next to this game? What game should we make next? What motorsport should we go after? Which brands do we want to involve? What makes sense in terms of linking it together? And I think the way I think about it, and having discussed also with Yap, our chairman, a lot about this, is a sort of hub and spoke model. So what do I mean? I mean, you go buy a car somewhere, or a bike, and then it works in multiple places, and you can layer these experiences on top of that. And I think racing games are kind of unique in the graphics around them are kind of unique in the gaming world. And as much as for quite a long time now, the assets that are produced are really stunning and almost photorealistic. And certainly with some of the things that are coming out of Eden Games and GMG, you'd be hard pressed to know whether you were looking at a photograph or a real car. And it's particular to racing because vehicles they're not as complex as people and animated monsters and things like that. So we're able to replicate something from the real world as an NFT, and I think that's really important. I think some of the other kind of trends that I'm seeing, with the likes of Nike and Fortnite and a few other examples, is that the underlying technology that supports these new opportunities in Web3 is sort of irrelevant to consumers. I mean, to some of us, it's very interesting. There'll always be this group of people who are highly engaged with all of the implications of different chains and transferability and earning, staking, all this kind of stuff. But really, what matters is this sort of understanding of meaningful ownership online. So really, in the real world, if I buy a car, I can go use it anywhere, right? Within reason. Obviously, there's laws and stuff, but that's my experience of owning a car in the real world. And there's this sort of artificial situation that's created by video games that we've all become very accustomed to it. Whereas you go into a game, you earn or buy a car, and that's where you use it in that game. And then when you finish playing that game, bye car, you'll never see it again. And that's not really the experience that we have in the real world. We have stories around cars. We remember places that we've been and things that we've done and achievements that we've achieved. And so I think this whole concept of ownership is where I want to have the center of the strategy for the ecosystem. And then that's easy to begin with, so you can start selling cars, and then you start adding to different games, which is a bit of work. And we're spending some time thinking about the future of interoperability. So how could that work? Like, how is a way that we can make this portfolio truly scalable so others can enter it without necessarily being in the list of games that I've said before, or even part of Animoca. So thinking about things like vehicle standards, how users can pass ownership between them using the REVV token as a kind of trustless form of transaction, and the strategy around chains and stuff. So there's those sort of key underpinning pillars of like what Web3 brings from a technical point of view. So meaningful ownership, interoperability, and being able to sell stuff and buy stuff. So it's not a one-way transaction. You don't buy a car and that's it. It's almost like you're it's a thing of value that you can play around with, have fun, create a story, and then if you want, you can pass that on to someone else, and all the history that you created will go with it, and the value. But then the other thing that I haven't mentioned here is the community. So the community and the way that people work in Web3 is very different to Web2. So the opportunity to have this group of people who believe in a project and getting them on board early and building in public, which is something that we haven't been very good at so far, but I'm really keen to move into that, and you'll hear some plans around that in a minute. But this idea of crossing the physical and the digital barrier, so people can connect online, but then there's also in real life experiences. We're already giving away tickets to things like MotoGP, merchandise, and there are loads of other ideas floating around, and we're just trying to create an ecosystem where those things can exist, but then new ideas are welcome, and there's a standard type of vehicle in the middle that everybody can sort of rally around. So that's the idea, and I think probably it ends up looking like some sort of hub where all this stuff takes place, and we're working on that. But it's getting these things in place now means that we're able to move forward with confidence that we're ready for whatever comes in the future, and we focus around the ownership of these assets that look photoreal, that mean something in the real world, but also online, just crossing that barrier. So that's the kind of vision for the ecosystem at the moment.
Well, that all sounds super straightforward and super easy. Now, go ahead and build it.
Sure. Yeah.
Um,
What?
no, I
Well,
mean,
one other thing. Sorry, it just reminded me. What, like the other thing, the other challenge that we have is we're sort of talking to that being ready for the future thing is that the market is, what someone was saying the other day, like 1 hour in Web3 is like sort of 3 months in the real world. So there's things are changing so quickly,
yeah,
whether it be new chains or technology. So that's something, and I think we're seeing a kind of switch between a sort of slow transition away from speculative type uh, purchases of NFTs to people who are buying them for the true value and the utility that they have, safe in the knowledge that there will be more utility coming in the future and more experiences that you can have, whether it's in the real world or in a new game or as part of some esports event or all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that.
yeah. No, I love the idea of being able to take one asset and, like you said, with interoperability and have it kind of brought across all the different games and titles that I'm playing. And something that I do a lot of compete in a lot of online races and specifically iRacing. And don't know if anyone listening now is involved with that, but iRacing is, well, relatively speaking, expensive. We have to buy every car, you have to buy every track. There's a 13-week season. You have to buy all the different tracks, and you have to buy the cars that you want to race in it. And so it can add up quite quickly. And then, but that's it. I can only bring that in iRacing. I can't go and play. I've got a rallycross car. I can't go and take that to dirt rally and or whatnot. So yeah, I love the idea of interoperability, and having vehicle standards that obviously will translate. So, like I said, all sounds super straightforward and easy. So I'm sure building this whole thing is obviously it's in kind of a whole other challenge altogether. So it doesn't get built on its own. Apart from all the studios, how are you planning on achieving kind of everything that you've just mentioned with this incredibly kind of grand vision?
Well,
I'm imagining an Avengers assemble situation, where we're getting a bunch of top guys and girls on board.
well, you can't do it on your own, that's for sure. There's a, like you say, there's all the studios and they're getting on and doing their things, and they all bring something different to the table, not just for their games, but also for the ecosystem. But I think it is really important to go immediately and start hiring people that are more intelligent than you to do this stuff, and that's what I've been doing. So I've found head of marketing Ilya, who's ex Google and Huawei, who's joined about 2 months ago, I think 3 months maybe, and he's sprung into action. He's like across all of the way that we like let people know about our games and where they're coming out and all that stuff. And like he's getting a grip on like the community and how we make sense of that. And there's a lot of stuff in the pipeline for this. And then I've also hired. I'm actually hiring two product directors. One's already on board. His name's Stefan Walter. He used to work at Inno Games, which is fairly significant strategy games company, and he's very very good, and he's picked up Formula E and Rev Racing in the last couple of weeks. So he'll be running with those and overlooking the development and all of the kind of commercials and understanding what the community wants and what makes sense for those games. And then there are other people coming on board. There's another, I think, 4 or 5 people joining in the next 2 or 3 months, the central team, to help bring this vision together, which will involve all sorts of comms and events and like probably new bits of tech and creating these standards that sit in the middle. Now that doesn't mean they're the only people involved. There are other teams in Animoca that sit centrally that have been incredibly helpful. So I already mentioned the tokenomics team, who are fantastic. And then there's a games design team as well that sits centrally, who are helping with a lot of the balancing and the design, and obviously all the normal the legal guys, the financial guys. Like there's a huge group of people like moving together to make this happen. So I haven't actually totted up how many people are involved. Obviously, they're not all full time, but it's probably something like 200 to 300 people working on this across the studios and centrally to deliver this vision. So yeah, it's not a small undertaking, but we have exactly the right people to do it. So it feels like a pretty positive uh, spot, and it's a pretty great opportunity to be here and to be part of the wider vision of Animoca to build the open metaverse. So yeah, that's how. There's still a lot to do, but that's the approach.
Yeah, I mean it's an exciting time. I think in kind of all my time at Rev and Animoca, I think now it's it's obviously gone through a cycle, and I think now kind of moving into let's say a new era of Rev. It definitely feels like there's a fire in the belly, and there's a everyone's very gung ho for all pointing towards the same direction. So thanks for all of that. Now I want to do a little segment, what I call quick fire updates. Give me one sec. Here you go.
Oh God,
Um,
here you go.
I'm gonna give you a name, or I'm
Mhm.
gonna just blurt out a word, and you're gonna give me a summary of what listeners can expect.
Okay.
Okay, you ready?
Yep.
All right, MotoGP Guru.
Oh, okay. So we talked a little bit about that just before. So it's a bit more detail. So we have this sponsorship of the MotoGP going on, and we did it last year, and it was great, and we're doing it again this year, and it's uh, Guru's a way to like supercharge the engagement between the MotoGP audience and essentially Web3. So it's a very kind of light experience where you get to predict who's going to win. It's sort of a fantasy type vibe where you choose who's going to win, come second, third, and in the sprint races and stuff. Each time there's a real world MotoGP. There's a lot of banter flying around about it. There's a TV show that's aired ahead of the weekend where like famous ex-riders and commentators have a guess, and they're kind of getting it right and wrong all over the shop, which is quite funny. I don't know if you watch MotoGP, but it's a lot less predictable than Formula One, so there's quite a lot at stake, and there's a real kind of mind game going on. So it's been a lot of fun working with all those guys and with Dorna on it. It's web based, so it's not an app, so you can access it really from anywhere on your mobile or your desktop. It has a wallet integrated into it. So when you create an account, you also making a crypto wallet, and then soon enough we'll be doing all sorts of acrobatics with that. And sort of I don't know exactly how it will play out, but for example, some sort of airdrop or this kind of thing. So that's cool. And then it also gives us the opportunity to give away tickets for our community. So we have competitions every time there's a real life MotoGP, and we've had some really. It's been really pleasant to share. So this is sort of once in a lifetime opportunity that we're able to offer, where people can come and be a VIP at the race and meet the teams and be inside what they call the box, where all of the telemetry is and the teams running around like tweaking the bikes, and they get to go onto the racetrack at the beginning and see everybody lining up before the race, take photos and all that kind of thing. And we're seeing lots of uptake. So thousands of users have signed up, and we're going to be running it into the rest of the season. Ending, I think our last big GP will be the Phillip Island one in Australia near Melbourne, which will be no doubt awesome. So yeah, that's what MotoGP Guru is all about.
All right, great. MotoGP Ignition Manager, go.
Oh, so yeah, MotoGP Ignition sort of mentioned on this before. It's been a slightly troubled development. It's definitely been pushed back quite a bit. But I got some good news. So we're going to be shipping an alpha into the community in July. So I've had assurances that this is we're very, very close to being ready to do this. So it should happen in the next few weeks. Obviously, July's in a week's time. So we'll put some details out soon about how you can be eligible to be part of the alpha. And what we want to do is this whole kind of build in public thing. We want to get feedback from the community, understand where we're going, where we've done things well or not, or hear everyone's ideas and put something together off the back of that. So that's what's happening with MotoGP Ignition.
All right, I'm back. Formula E high voltage.
Formula E High Voltage, also a game that's been a bit delayed. Stefan's picked this up over the last. Stefan started, I think, 4 months ago now. He's been running with this. He has gone into. He's met the Formula E team a few times, and everyone's super excited. I don't know if you know this, but this is the first ever official Formula E game on any platform, whether Web3 or Web2 or anything. So there's a lot of excitement from those guys and from us. And we are going to we're going to launch in Q3. I want to. We're currently targeting currently targeting August, but it's there's a few little bits that we're fiddling around, so it may slip a little bit, but that's the plan. It's a manager game, and you get to buy your car, set your cars up, and then follow the race and adjust strategy and all the rest of it. So we're pretty excited about that one.
Awesome. What about Talk Drift 2?
Oh yeah, so Talk Drift 2. So we talked about this. It's looking pretty good. We saw the trailer. So they have I think they're revealing something next week. I asked if I could do a little preview on this call. I think Matt did as well, because we know what's coming, but I think they want to keep their powder dry. So keep an eye out for that. So that there'll be an announcement next week about
computer said no. We're not allowed to to say anything. Rev Racing.
So Rev Racing is, like I said, I think a huge opportunity for us. So Stefan's also picked this up, and we have had a massive sort of brainstorm inside Animoca and with the third party who builds it for us, a company called Tiny Digital Factory, who are based in France. And there's a very interesting plan taking shape. Stefan is just pushing that through on our side, because obviously there's like costs associated with it, whatever. And then we will start sharing our progress, and he can talk through what that is. We should probably set something up actually for him, so he can maybe something like this, so he can have a general update on Formula E and maybe Rev Racing as well. But I think that's a real, it's a really great opportunity for all of us. I think it'd be really fun what they have in mind to play that, and a great way to make use of all the existing assets that we have out there.
Yeah. Well, Stefan sounds like a very busy man.
Yes. Yeah.
Torque Squad.
So Talk Squad, we haven't talked about Talk Squad yet, but Talk Squad is obviously your thing, Matt. And this is a PFP collection for the uninitiated, which Matt set up a while ago, which is super cool, like avatars of sort of futuristic drivers / riders. And it's had a pretty significant uptake. It's got a community around it. And what we want to do with it is make it the centerpiece sort of collection for the whole of the ecosystem. So the idea is to, this is a place where we can explore interoperability and a few other things. I don't know if maybe it sort of feels like maybe you should talk about it a little bit, Matt. Sorry, during your
yeah, sure.
yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I recently did an update with the Torque Squad community, but essentially, yeah, I think interoperability is very much at the heart of how we move forward with Torque Squad. Like Will mentioned, we've got so many different titles, we've got so many games, experiences that we can tap into, and Torque Squad kind of being your identity within this motor racing metaverse is something that I definitely feel very strongly about. And now obviously, you guys and kind of the wider team all understand sort of where I want to take Torque Squad, and kind of we're very much singing off the same hymn sheet on that. When I started Torque Squad, it was very much about having a group of riders and drivers, all connected by the love of motorsport, regardless of where you belong or where you think you belong. If that's if that's kind of if you're a massive F1 fan, or you love motocross, or you're into drifting, there's something there for you, and that's something that I think is kind of representative of the wider Rev ecosystem. So there's a lot we're working on in terms of getting everything ready for for that, interoperability isn't something that's just going to happen overnight. But you know, we're all working together very closely. You know, on calls all the time with all the different studios and people involved to make sure that we have this kind of one vision moving forward. And so it's an exciting time. I know the community probably would have liked to have seen different things, but I keep trying to say, look, we're part of a much, you know, something that's much bigger than just us, and I think that's really important and something that's gonna continue to grow over time. So yeah, Talk Squad. Um, anything else from you? All good?
Oh, we should probably cover Eden as well.
Yeah,
I don't know whether that was part of
that
your.
was my next
Okay,
one.
cool,
Here
cool.
you go, Eden Games.
So yeah, I mean, we kind of talked about them already in a way, but they've made a bunch of different games in the racing space, all of which have been very well received. You go out and check out Stradale if you're Stradale, as I now know it should be called, on Apple Arcade. It's there now, but that's not the only thing. But these aren't the only things they're focusing on. Obviously, like there are some other titles in the works, and so we will. I mean, I can't share exactly what they are right now. They've just been kind of going through the sort of pre-production phase, and they are seriously interesting. And I will make sure. And I know that the studio is excited about sharing what they are. We'll set up some calls when they're ready to start sharing what they've been working on. But it's pretty cool, basically.
Yeah.
So look forward to hearing about that.
And when you guys will hear about that, we'll definitely have a show about it. So stay tuned. Will, thank you so much for sharing all that information with us. But before we wrap up, we've got a couple questions from the community. Let me just pull this up. Hey, we've got Mr. Billy.
Hey, Billy.
Guys, everyone, say hi to Billy. Billy's from Grease Monkey Games, and he is a top guy. And you're going to be seeing him on the show very soon. So say hi while you can. All right. The first question is from Chelsea again.
Mm-hmm.
And Chelsea asks, will Rev projects come to the format of play to own games in the future without big tournaments in Rev token and money? The main earnings will be in shards that can be used inside games to improve inventory, rarity, and so on. And earning a large number of Rev and large prize money is no longer, the norm.
We've talked about this a lot internally. I think there's a balance, right? I think the Rev token obviously has value, and likewise the shard token, which has been more recently released. I think it's important to give away prizes. I think so. Yeah, like the answer is there will be big tournaments and there will be big prizes for sure. Like this is the way I see the future of the sort of online Web3 space, and the reason being that I think longer term, we're going to create this place where like genuine skill and the kind of risk of driving an expensive vehicle become like similar to the real world. So there will be a sort of funnel from like for people playing at an early stage just for fun, all the way through to like really good drivers who are here because they want to make money, and they're going to show off their skills in front of large audiences. That's how I perceive it. So the play and earn thing as a default is probably not the longer term vision, but there'll definitely be ways to generate rev by playing to reward your efforts. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you for that. Billy's just commented he's just off the plane from the Gold Coast showing off Torque Drift 2 at Unreal Fest. Super exciting.
That is.
But I'm still slightly upset that I wasn't allowed to show the video because that video is awesome. All right. I think. Let me see. Chelsea's actually just commented saying, in any case, the first months of Rev Racing blew my head off. I play like crazy every day. Thanks, Rev team.
Awesome.
Thank you, Chelsea. Here's an interesting question. And one that I think is something that we've actively worked on over a period of time. No, Brendan's kind of one of our community managers that actually replied to this question. But I want to see how you think about this because it's actually quite interesting from a narrative point of view. How do you plan on attracting the Formula E crowd to the Formula E high voltage game when the narrative around NFTs is somewhat negative and bad for the environment?
Okay, that's a good question. So the first thing to note is that the Formula E game will be on Flow, which is carbon neutral. So there's definitely, and that's deliberate, right? We don't want to be associated with carbon impact, and also, for that matter, neither do Formula E. And this is something that we're not just exclusively thinking about on Formula E, but this is super relevant. So that's how we're tackling that. So it'll all be very green and carbon neutral, sure. And then bringing the Formula E crowd into the high voltage game. I mean, the assets for the game are really cool. You can play the game for free. You don't need to own an NFT, so you can come and experience it for yourself, and then you can understand the benefits of owning individual assets and taking yourself on a kind of journey through that manager game to the like end game. So I think I think putting a barrier in front of people who are new to the space around like KYC and opening wallets and things is, it's something that we're used to as, having worked in and been in Web3 for a long time. But if you kind of zoom out a bit, then that isn't really how most people want to experience a game for the first time. So we're looking at onboarding people in a sort of Web2 way, as well as bringing in, all of the people who want to go straight into the Web3 element.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it's important that you don't have to understand you don't really, I love the technology side of things, so I kind of geek out about that a little bit. But as a let's say a casual player coming in to enjoy these games, they shouldn't have to really go deep into the weeds of understanding how the tech works to be able to play. And I think that's something really important and is echoed by a lot of the studios and teams kind of building what we are building moving forward. So yeah, thank you, Will. Look, I know we've gone slightly over time, and you're an incredibly busy man, so I don't want to keep you for too much
Okay.
longer. So I think that's all we've got time for today. Thank you, Will, and thank you to everyone listening.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's been a really interesting episode, if I do say so myself. Um, and
Hope so.
um, make sure you guys follow all of our socials. Chat with us on Twitter or hang out with us in the community on Discord. Make sure you subscribe and follow our YouTube and Twitch channels for more of the Rev Show. This is our first, but definitely not our last. We've got an exciting episode that we're unfortunately is not going to be live next week, but we will record and post it. So make sure you don't miss out on any future videos. Go like, subscribe, share it, tell your mom, tell your friends, do all that. Will, it's been a pleasure. Any closing thoughts?
No, it's just great. It actually feels really good to, connect with the community, and obviously we'll have dialogue and stuff going forward. So I'd like to set up something regular. So I'll be talking to Ilya about it, but it's nice to, get out there and let everyone know what we've been working on for the last 6 months, and, looking forward to the future.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome, Will. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep revving. Bye.
Bye, guys.